I am John Carroll. I'm a co-director with Braver Angels Music, as a lot of you know. But if you don't, it's nice to meet you. Glad you're here. This is Brent Morden from my friend Brent from Fair in the Arts. And would you like to tell people about yourself, Brent?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, John. I'm glad to be here. So as we welcome people into the Zoom room, I will keep the momentum going and tell you a bit about myself. I'm Brent Morden. I am here representing FAIR, the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, which is a nonpartisan nonprofit dedicated to advancing a common culture of fairness, understanding, and humanity. And we're very thrilled to partner with Braver Angels, a phenomenal sister organization, in putting together this event. And I direct FAIR in the Arts, which is our department of FAIR that represents people who are in the arts in any capacity, professionals, hobbyists, enthusiasts who want to work together to pursue and advance the culture that we want to see. A culture that is based on creative freedom and humanity and creativity and play and excellence and open-mindedness, the values that I think we want to feel that support us as artists. And so it's just a great opportunity for us to come together and have this discussion about a very relevant topic. Outside of FAIR, I'm also in music, like my friend and colleague here, John and Chris, who I'll introduce as well shortly. I'm a music director. I direct choirs and bands. I teach all the way from elementary to college level. I sing as well and compose. So I'm very involved in music. And I think we saw at the Braver Angels convention the incredible power of music to bring us together and highlight what we have in common, our common humanity, and how that is stronger than what divides us, fitting in the theme of today's discussion. I want to introduce our other moderator here. He is a choral director as well, a longtime prolific educator based in Kansas City. I'm in New York. That's what I forgot to mention. I'm in New York City in Queens. Our friend here, director of Cantori, Kansas City, the choir, host of the Choralosophy podcast, the hottest new podcast out on the waves. You all have to check it out. Chris Munce. Chris, anything you feel free to take it away from here.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple things about myself. I'm a big supporter of both FAIR and Braver Angels. I've been able to create some content for both organizations to get the word out about what they are doing. I recently also got a chance to go to the national convention in Gettysburg, which was an incredible experience. So I am, in my role, I guess, as a music educator, just really sensitive, I suppose, to these types of topics, because I think about all of them when I walk into the classroom, and I think about the issues that tear my students apart are also the issues that tear us apart when we have our conversations online. And so with the Choralosophy podcast, I'm blessed because our platform is the biggest music education platform in the world. And so I have the ability to speak to thousands and thousands of music educators every week about ways that we can do all the things that Brent just talked about, which is to use music to bring us together instead of trying to figure out ways that we can use it to tear each other apart. So I'm excited for this conversation. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, you two, for being here. That's incredible introductions, y'all. Well, I'm John Carroll. I'm from Braver Angels Music. And similarly to FAIR in the Arts, we spend all of our time as a team thinking about ways to use music to bring people together, whether we're trying to roll out songwriting programs across the US as a way of like using music to actually bring people together, or if we want to think about critically about issues like this, about what we're about to talk about tonight. And I just think thinking about this event, I thought it was such an interesting setup that like I and our group spends all of our time thinking about how to use music to bring people together. And here we have an example of music doing the exact opposite and dividing. And so I think it's really important that we get together and talk about it from our perspective of having critically thought about this issue so much. So let me set the scene. And the way this is going to work, this is kind of new format for us. So what I wanted to do was get together two people who think about this like very critically all the time and lead them through like a discussion of how they think about it, because these are issues that like haunt me and plague me. And I'm really after answers here. And I want to talk to y'all and see if y'all have any and ways we can come together and think about this. And then about halfway through, we're going to ask y'all questions, and you'll get to raise hands. Laura Sue, who's helping us mod tonight. Hi, Laura Sue. Thank you so much for being here. Is going to call on people and going to give you a chance to participate. Now, we were originally targeting like 50 people. Last I checked, we were closer to 100 people sign up. So it's going to be hard for everybody to talk tonight, and we're just going to do our best. But thanks for bearing with us. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So this first question, I just kind of wanted to set the scene. Part of the thing about tonight was I did not want to focus too much on like particular viewpoints, like you're for Jason Aldean, you're against Jason Aldean. I didn't really want the focus of this conversation to be about that. I wanted to focus more on the controversy part of it, because it's more about how I see these cycles just play out over and over and over. And I want to get together with y'all and see if we can think about ways out of that, or maybe like different patterns that we can help establish in culture that will lead us out of these kinds of loops. So Jason Aldean is more of a case study for us. So here we go. All right, the initial setup. Jason Aldean released a song, Try This in a Small Town, in May 2023. But the song didn't really gain attention until July 18th, when a music video of the song was released. There was an immediate backlash to the video, and it became a polarizing controversy across pop culture. There was a large increase in coverage, an avalanche of internet memes, and a lot of thought pieces often portraying Jason Aldean as either a villain or a hero. The tension escalated to a very heated, very quickly. I think the last point I just want to throw out there is like part of this conversation was just to note that CMT and other radio stations dropped the music out of rotation, rallying the cry of cancel culture from the conservatives. So while it's not the focus of this discussion today, I thought it would be helpful just to give context to the situation, to allow each panelist to kind of outline like their position and where they're coming from on this controversy. And I was going to hand it over first to Chris.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Okay, so I'm going to just get us started with some key thoughts that I had kind of drummed up before we started tonight. And one is just a technical one related to this idea that John just outlined, which I think was an important point, which is to say that when the song Try This in a Small Town came out, and let's say just the audio, right, on Spotify, it didn't really make that much of a splash. In fact, it probably would not have. I would make, of course, we can never prove a counterfactual like that. But I would say, had there not been a music video, we would not be having this conversation. Just putting a song on Spotify is like throwing a hot dog down a hallway. It's not going to do much. And it's that there. In fact, we all know this kind of in the video landscape nowadays. You've got to have a video go viral if you want your song to be known. And so when you look at that music video, it's clear that they know that too. Like they know that they're going to throw some images in there that's going to spark some type of a controversy. So I think as we go throughout this conversation, it might be good for us to separate the video from the song. Because if you look at the song lyrics itself, the maybe not as controversial as even the imagery in the video. So that's just a point there. One, of course, also that we're going to probably need to talk about, I'm sure people will bring this up, because this was a lot part of the conversation about the Aldean song, is the concept of the dog whistle. There is, almost any time there's a piece of art or journalism or anything put out, somebody is thinking that there's a dog whistle happening about something. But that also should help us understand that the concept of a dog whistle is pretty fraught with errors in the first place, because it encourages us to believe that we can mind read. And in art, if we apply the concept of a dog whistle to art, it can be even more problematic, because then it displays that the person is misunderstanding the very nature of art. And whether that be music or any other type of art, the nature of art is that I listen to it and I get one concept out of it, and you listen to it and you get a different concept out of it. So the idea that we can know what somebody really meant by a song until they talk about what they meant by a song, I think is something we have to be very, very careful of. In fact, when we make art, we want there to be multiple ways to interpret that piece of art. And when we start to assign motives to other people about their art, then almost always we're wrong. Either that, or we are missing some valuable piece of insight into what that person was talking about. Another thought to get us going tonight is that it's been kind of something I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is that I don't really think that America has an ideological left-right divide in the same way that we've been led to believe. I think really we have more of a rural-urban divide. And I think that the cultures of those types of living environments are so disparate that it creates the impression of a political divide, when at the root of it, there's this urban-rural. And myself as a suburban resident, I feel like as a suburban resident, I'm always being forced to choose one. There is no suburban dog in this fight. It's like we have to choose, do we want to side with the city people or the country people? And I think that this this song is kind of an analogy for that. One thing I thought about pointing out too, I don't know if anyone saw this, but there was it's been a long time since I've said the words. There was a brilliant skit on SNL recently, but there was a brilliant skit on SNL recently, and I think they called it Republican or Not. And it was hilarious because what they did was it was like a game show quiz thing where the contestants had to hear somebody say something they believe, and then the guests had to guess, is this person a Republican or not? And by taking away certain context from what the people were saying, nobody could figure out if it was a Republican or a Democrat actually saying these things. And it was so funny, and it was really, really good. But I think in a lot of ways, the context of the music video of this song that we're talking about is a good example of that. You add that context to the video and you change the meaning in people's minds when they hear the song. Another example, I know at some point we're probably going to come up with or want to talk about the Oliver Anthony song, Rich Men North of Richmond, is another great example of this. People heard that song and they, if you're on the left and if you're a blue person, you heard that song as they're singing about the stuff I care about. Yes, he's thinking about the stuff I'm caring about. But then MAGA people heard the song and they thought the same thing. And I just think, as a person who, frankly, when I wore a yellow ribbon at the Braver Angels convention, so I thought that was particularly hilarious because I heard him talking about both of all of y'all. So I think that was a brilliant thing about that song. And so I think, again, just kind of, I guess I'll wrap up my three kind of main points, which is that we have to be careful when we decide what art means for other people. Because the way we interpret art is very personal. It's kind of like I can't decide what religion means to you. I can only decide what it means to me. And I think the same thing goes for art. So I'm excited to hash some more of this stuff out.
Thank you so much, Chris. Brent, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, Chris, thank you for your wonderful setting of the stage. And I want to extend some of what you're saying and also help frame the way that I'm thinking about this. And I'm sure many of us are thinking about this song as a lens into this moment in our culture. I believe it was Leonard Bernstein who was asked what's the meaning of music, and he said, I might be misquoting, but I want to give due diligence. The meaning of music is how it makes you feel, and this song made a lot of people feel a lot of sort of different ways. And I think, Chris, you're definitely right to note that it's worth differentiating the lyrics from the video. I rewatched the video, I re-listened to the song before our conversation here today, and there's a lot of evocative imagery that makes me at least think, and I think this is my main question when watching this song. Sorry, there's a loud motorcycle that just went by. Is what is Jason Aldean's intention here? And I think when we write songs, I'm sure we have a lot of songwriters here. I'm a composer myself. What is our intention when we're writing a song? we're telling a story, right? We have something that we just have to get out into the world. We have to tell our story in some way. And I remember as I'm watching this video, there's a lot of imagery that might stir up feelings in people. And same with the lyrics. I wonder, is Jason Aldean, and we can't get into his mind, right? But I wonder, is he writing this is this really an honest story that he has to tell to the world and really just be true to himself? Perhaps it is. Or is there also a business aspect to it where he knows that he's going to get more clicks if there's more potentially controversial content in the lyrics or the imagery that will help open up conversations like these? I have many conservative friends, and I'm kind of helping organize networks of young conservatives in the arts, just in addition to my work at FAIR, which is nonpartisan and cross-partisan. A lot of my conservative friends, even in New York City, where I think an urban conservative is quite different from a rural conservative, they were thrilled that there is some representation of let's say the red side, to go along with the Braver Angels nomenclature, that there's some representation of our voice in the mainstream. I think a lot of artists, people who come to Braver Angels and FAIR, feel that our voices are not being heard, even if we're not conservative, if we're not on the right, but people who are maybe think differently from the accepted range of narratives or viewpoints that we see in and hear in music, in the music industry. And for a lot of people, I think Jason Aldean represents and same with Oliver Anthony, represents an anti-establishment call and a cry that's saying, I have a voice as well, and I want to tell my story. And my story, although it's not pretty, it doesn't line up with a lot of what the music industry wants me to sing about. It's not kumbaya. It tells a different story. And that's worth sharing with the world. So how to wrap this up? Just my main question when I revisited this song, and we want to hear from everybody today, but my main question is, what is Jason Aldean's intention? And how much does it matter as well?
Thank you to both of you. And I agree with your point about the intention of the artist. I'm just going to quickly add, because I don't want to be too much of a voice in this, but as like a counterbalance, one of the things I think about all the time is, and I guess in this context, it would be that the intent for me is like problem solving, people fighting, basically two groups fighting. I'm not too worried about like what the artist's original intent is. I'm more focused on these groups are fighting. How can I get them to stop? Like there's a level in which like once the song has been sung and people have like taken the narrative and made it their own, then I feel like part of the job is to problem solve them there, where they're telling the narrative and not necessarily where the artist is telling it. So that's kind of my position on this, just throwing in for a little bit of balance, but not to say that it's very valid to consider what the artist intended to. So thank y'all. All right. Next question. When I was thinking about like division and the journey people go on when from hearing a song to I'm going to go fight with somebody online about it. And I say that a little tongue in cheek, but kind of not. This question is aimed at like getting at the start of that. And so here's what I wrote. I think that it's important to understand the emotional journey we go through as we encounter like a controversial piece. So I was wondering if can each of you speak to how you felt upon first seeing this issue or this song, like maybe the first time you saw the video or read an article about it, and then describe to us the journey you went through in reconciling your emotions with a more thought through position on the issue. Like, oh, you have the initial reaction, the gut wrench reaction, and then usually you kind of line up a logical argument after. So I was going to let y'all talk about that. And I'm going to start with Brent.
Great question, John. We humans are feeling creatures. We're both feeling and thinking creatures, right? And I think we have a natural proclivity to have emotional reactions to what we encounter in the world. And that's not a bad or a good thing. That just is. And I think it's useful in many circumstances. As artists, we need to feel. I grew up in a very intellectual household, and I grew up a very intellectual, bookish, school-oriented child. And part of my journey as a creative person was getting more in touch with my heart and learning how to feel. And so I think about how did I feel reacting to this song for the first time. There was a kind of excitement. And what is the song about anyway? I think it's worth framing that. It's kind of like a fuck around and find out anthem in a certain way, of at least the way I see it and I interpret it. Jason Aldean and the songwriters are seeing all this mayhem in the world and this lawlessness, and they're like, you know what? We got to get our shit together as a society. And if you fuck around, you'll find out. So, try that in a small town. It's that idea. And it's kind of a rugged anthem in that way. And part of me was like, yeah, I'm into it. Like, I love that. This is just, this is very different from what I'm hearing, the music that I'm hearing Spotify playlists curate, for example. And my initial emotional reaction was also, I grew up in and I grew up in New York City, which has a very liberal, leftist, progressive bent politically, and also just in terms of the cultural environment here. And so, kind of the other side of me, growing up in that environment, reacted to like, oh my God, this guy is a bigot. Like, how is he? The imagery in this video is really evoking things that are dark pieces of our past that are perhaps intentionally controversial or provocative, but I think, just going back to my earlier point of that, we're both feeling and thinking creatures. It's worth embracing all of the different types of reactions that we have, and even though we might feel an emotion towards this song, thinking through that and understanding that people have different reactions to music and art in general, not just this song, but music and art in general. I don't know if that answered your question, but I'm thinking through how I'm feeling through these questions. So I'll ping pong it over to Chris.
Did these feelings like help you? Did these feelings help you decide how you like your logical thoughts? Man, I really hate that. Why do I hate that? Man, I really like that. Why do I like that? Like, I feel like it's kind of like a reaction and a logical structure built.
I'll say, as a songwriter myself and as a composer myself, and I'm sure many of us can relate to this. We have fellow songwriters, fellow creatives here. I'm always searching for inspiration, and it's clear that Jason Aldean and the songwriters, they were inspired by something in the world to tell this story and to write this song, and you can hear it in his voice, like as a fellow choir director. I'm sure Chris knows when we're working with voice students and privately or in a group, when they're really connecting with the music. You can tell when they're just singing the notes and rhythms and just not really engaging versus when they're really connecting. And I can tell that there's a real connection. At least that's what I got from Jason Aldean's performance in the song. And so there was something inspired. That's where I'll leave my answer to this question. There was something inspired in this song, and that's worth paying attention to.
Thank you so much, Brent. Chris, what was your emotional journey with the song, and do you think it influenced, like, which way do you think it flowed? Did it influence your position, or how did that tension work with you?
Yeah, so I would say I kind of hinted at this before when I talked about how the video was what made it a thing, and that we had this conversation. I didn't come across the song at all until there was a video, until there was already a controversy. So I'm not a country music fan. I don't really listen to country music. I don't associate with the mimetic tribe, so to speak, of the wears the cowboy hats and the jeans and drives the truck group of people. I don't fit with any of those stereotypes, even though I live 5 minutes away from all the people who do, on the outskirts of Kansas City. And so I didn't come across the song. And so when I first saw the song, I had the exposure of the imagery of the video. So that, of course, includes all these very 2020 riot season type images that are going through the entire video. And my first emotional reaction was to be taken back to how scary and dark of a time that was for me, my family, and for my friends and neighbors, and of course, all of us, was to be kind of transported back to summer of 2020, knowing that I'm not really allowed to leave my house, but I also have to know that a whole bunch of other people who have left their house might come marching through my yard at any given point. And knowing what that feels like as being a relatively new experience for me in my life because of where I live. So there was that, just kind of, it was memory lane kind of evoking in that, but it wasn't, I don't think I was really reacting to the song. I was reacting to the imagery in the music video. And it wasn't until later when I started hearing people talk about the song being a racist dog whistle and all of these other things, as you hear my dog bark in the background. She agrees with me, by the way. And so I wasn't until later I dug into the lyrics and I started to feel sad because of the song. And it was really, the sadness came from, again, this is a song, kind of an anthem for a tribe that I don't associate with necessarily. But my family does. Like, everybody in my family are, proud to be from the country, Trump supporting. My brother, bless his heart, my younger brother is a wealthy city dwelling person who dresses like he lives in the country because he so associates with like this whole like culture as part of our culture in the United States. And so I saw I reacted with sadness towards people who are attacking a culture that they don't understand. Because my entire family, I am the raging liberal in my family, but I understand their point of view. I understand that they are not motivated by the things that I was seeing online for caring essentially about the values of their small town upbringing, because I think that's ultimately something that is it's fine to be proud of where you come from. And it's fine to be proud of the culture that you found benefit from. And so I saw a lot of attacking of, essentially how I took it was a lot of attacking my family, even though that's not really, it's not my culture, but I understand the culture. And so I think that's really where my emotions went with it, was from kind of just scary memories from the past into like sadness that everyone misunderstands each other. I think that summarizes it pretty well.
Thank you so much, Chris. That's really interesting, the thought that maybe the pandemic and some of the memories from that played into this hype, or you know what I mean. And I also think it's pretty key. Like, I think it's interesting that you approach this from a level of empathy because you have that background. So kind of want to like tab those maybe as ways of thinking through how we get through this as a culture. Thank you. I'm going to go to next question is, there's a thing that always like perplexes me. And I think it's like really key to like trying to figure out how to problem solve why we fight over things. And I just haven't figured it out. So I'm going to ask y'all. The thought is, tensions get so high so very quickly in these controversies. But what do you perceive that you're fighting for? Or what are the stakes that cause you to be so emotionally invested? And I guess I think of it as I like see something happen, and then I see like this rush of media and content creators, and it's like they're fighting to be king of the hill. And I have a really hard time trying to put into words what it means to be king, what's at the top of this hill. Like, I'm not quite yet sure. And so I was going to ask y'all, what do you think people perceive are the stakes when they start discussing these controversies? And I think it's, Chris, I think it's your turn this time to start.
Yeah. So I'll answer a short kind of quip, I guess, for my own self. And one is that if you're asking for me personally, how do I keep my emotions from, I guess, getting so high, or the tensions getting so high in conversations like this, it's not really an issue for me because I don't think that that's effective. And I'm really more interested in effective communication. Like, I want people to understand me. when I'm talking. I want them to understand where I'm coming from. And in my experience, letting my emotions lead the conversation will simply cause. So like if I'm leading with emotion, if I'm emoting as my mode of communication, then I know that the other person on the other end of that conversation is going to respond with emotion, because as Brent said earlier in his opening, we are humans are feeling creatures. Humans don't need my help to feel emotions. So if I'm going to start a conversation off right away with this, like with an emotionally charged thing, that's going to only make it harder for other people to hear me. So I try to avoid that. I make a conscious effort to avoid that. In fact, if anyone here follows me on Twitter, in my Twitter bio, it still says that I'm the founder of the ineffectual dusk web on the internet, because I know that if you want to make sure that your follower count on the internet stays low, have calm conversations. Because no one will follow you or retweet you, and no one will make you go viral if you have calm, kind conversations. The way we go viral is by pissing someone off. And I just don't want to play that game. Like, I'm not willing to play that game. I'm too busy to deal with all of the ping, 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 ping on my phone that would happen if I played into that. But here's the thing. This is, I think, goes now to the rest of your question, John, where we're thinking about this on a societal level. Why do these types of things get blown up? And I think I just explained it. I think our social media algorithm and environment incentivizes this type of stuff. It actually makes it so that it's rewarding. It's like a dopamine hit for someone to say something really horrible about another person, regardless of what our topic is, whether it's a country song or whatever, and then have that constant gratification from people who will cheer you on, because everything we say online about something is going to algorithmically find a group of people who are going to respond to it. That's the entire business model. And so we are more likely to get those types of emotional supercharged responses if we do the conversation online than if we were to have the conversation right here, or even better if all 50 or whatever of you were sitting on the couch across from me in my studio here. We would have a very calm conversation. Probably no one would leave pissed off. I'll finish with this on this question. So I mentioned that I got to go to the Braver Angels convention this summer, and like many teachers do when they come back to school, we always have this little slide up on the screen that shows something cool we did over the summer. And I had pictures from our family vacations, and I had a picture of my wife and I sitting at the Braver Angels convention that was in my little slide of back to school stuff. And I told the kids what this was, that it was a convention where like they make you sit down with people who disagree with you about political stuff. And I had one boy raise his hand. And he goes, "I bet there were like tons of fights." And I was like, actually zero. Like I saw 0 fights. And he was like, "Whoa, that's really cool." And I said, "Yeah, because the conversations didn't happen online. They were in person." And he's like, yeah, I guess that would make sense. That was pretty cool, man. Like that was the response from the 15-year-old boy. So I think if the 15-year-old boy is insightful enough to get that, I think we can all get that as well.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm going to turn it over to Brent.
Yeah, I love this question that I think is an important one, which is, what are the stakes here? Why are we talking about this? Why does this matter? And it matters to me, and I think many of us here, because I know I as an artist, as a songwriter and creator of music, I want to be able to not be afraid of telling my stories when I'm writing music. I think a lot of artists are self-censoring and going along to get along because they know that the industry rewards certain points of view and certain stories and certain narratives. And I think Jason Aldean had the choice of, perhaps I'm speaking for him, but in my mind, I picture that he had the choice of going along to get along, of playing nice, of writing, a harmless country music that kind of just fits, doesn't stir the pot. But it's just exciting to see him tell a story that kind of goes against the grain and breaks the mainstream and is kind of a cry to or an FU in some way to the establishment. That excites me as an artist who wants to have the freedom to play with ideas and take risks telling stories without worrying about, am I going to lose my livelihood? Am I going to lose professional and personal opportunities for just trying to take risks and play? And so to me, those are the stakes of it's not just free speech, which is important. And I think for me, fundamental. It's also the culture of of creative freedom. I think if there's one positive takeaway I want to see, and I think many of us want to see from this moment in our culture, it's being able to embrace different stories and get closer to an industry, a culture in the music industry that allows room and encourages different stories to be told. That to me, just creative freedom and opening up the palette of human experience that we explore through the arts, that to me is very exciting. And that's to me what the stakes are here.
Thanks so much, Brent. So Chris, my key takeaway was that you think that social media is like a key amplifier of this. And then Brent, think I tend to think of it as like an identity issue thing where people are associating, they're kind of fighting for their identity. Like, I believe this, and they see it under attack when people say something different. And I think it's really interesting that you brought up the point that maybe you're not only fighting for your identity, but maybe other people, your group's identity. Like, you want to create a space for your group to have space to be able to say what your group wants to say. Would you say that's fair? Kind of what you were saying, Brent?
Yeah, we all belong to many different groups, and identity is obviously complex. Like, we all are individuals with our own backgrounds and stories and life experiences, and I think music at its best in one way explores that in a way that makes us relate to other people's identities and stories. And I think a lot of people felt represented hearing Jason Aldean and also hearing Oliver Anthony. A lot of people felt represented, that their points of view, which are maybe not maybe shunned by the mainstream industry, are finally have a voice. There's this idea, I'll wrap up here. I do want to hear from other people, but I think there's this perception that has some truth to it, that the music industry and the arts industries are very heavily dominated by a certain way of thinking that rewards conformity of thought and rewards certain ideas, a window of accepted ideas that you're allowed to make movies about, or you're allowed to write songs about, and that if you kind of go against the grain, if you take risks, then you're not going to receive funding, or people don't want to listen to you, or you're going to face social backlash. And just to return to what I was saying earlier, it's why this is so compelling. Hearing this song for so many of us is hearing a different point of view break out into the mainstream, get millions of views. Same with Oliver Anthony, a different point of view, a different story, a different way of thinking about experience.
Thanks, Brent. And I think both of your answers play into my next question, at least. Just for the panelists, I definitely wanted to try to wrap up by 7:45 so that we had time for the community to speak. So I'm going to try to do 2 more questions, and we're going to hit the community, just to let you know. But this next one is one that I think about a lot. And this is just kind of a theory that I'm positing, and I'd be interested to hear your take on it. I often think there's an ironic aspect to people's reactions, and I think of it as like the martyr effect. So, for instance, the song was, like we said, the song was only middling in conversation until there was a backlash against the video, and that rocketed up to number 2 on the Billboard charts and also caused it to go viral on social media. Similarly, the success of the video created by the backlash acted as a rallying cry of the position in opposition of the video. So it seems like we end up in a feedback loop where moral outrage from one group only acts as fuel for the other side. And so like both sides end up doing something that ultimately benefits the other side at least as much as if it's benefiting them. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the irony of that kind of action. So I wanted to hear how y'all think about that. And you could even say it's wrong. It's just like a hypothesis I have. So Brent, I think you're up.
Yeah, I think it's worth thinking about has this song contributed to greater division and polarization in American culture and culture writ large? In some ways, it might have. I don't know if Jason Aldean is necessarily at fault for that. There were in news outlets such as NPR and the Free Press, I think those are two good examples of contrasting essays responding to this song. I don't remember exactly what each one said, but I think the general gist of that is that NPR had a more critical take on this song as evoking more racist imagery of this courthouse that was the site of a lynching, that there were nefarious motives behind Jason Aldean and the music video. Whereas for the Free Press, Coleman Hughes, our friend Coleman, wrote a piece saying, no, this is not racist. Jason Aldean is not in favor of lynching. This is a ridiculous smear campaign attempt by people who are out to get him and trying to just contribute to this divisive culture in America. And I think I'm thinking through this in real time as we're talking about things here. I think having different reactions to this and having divided reactions does not necessarily mean that this is a divisive time or a divisive moment in our culture. Even though, who's responsible for creating the division? I think that's my question that I'm landing on in here is if Jason Aldean's song contributed to greater division in society, who's responsible for that? And has it? I want to hear from Chris.
So yes, that's an interesting question. Who is at fault for that? And I would say, so here's how I'll respond to that. I think that Jason Aldean's producers / business managers who are trying to sell the song absolutely, clearly tried to poke the bear with that music video. It gets obvious. Like, they are, to use the 2020 kind of riot protest imagery, they knew exactly what they were getting into. But that is not necessarily saying that the song's racist, or even that the ideas being produced in the video are racist. But there's also the business aspect of it. As I mentioned, on my Twitter account, I'm not going to go viral because I won't poke the bear like that. They went viral because they poked the bear. And they got exactly what they wanted, which is tons and tons of clicks and views and controversy that draws that. And so it'd be very difficult to convince me that they didn't do that on purpose. In fact, you mentioned the building in the background in the music video, and there maybe at some point in history there were lynchings near that building or whatever. And I was like, when I saw that video, I knew, like, oh, wow, that building looks kind of racist. But, and so, of course, I'm being facetious, but there were clearly some images in that music video that were intended to evoke out of us some certain types of fears and insecurities that we have about our culture and our society. And that's how I would put that. So I actually want to go into the lyrics real quick for that, because I want to make sure we don't get past the actual song that we were talking about here. But I think a lot of this controversy, if you're going to put any of it in the lyrics at all, they come right out of the first couple stanzas of the poem, so to speak, or the lyrics of the song. They go like this: sucker punch somebody on a sidewalk, carjack an old lady at a red light, pull a gun on the owner of a liquor store. Yeah, I think it's cool. We'll act like a fool if you like. Cuss out a cop, spit in his face, stomp on the flag, and light it up. Okay, so in the opening part of the poem, or the song lyrics, I think what's happening here is that if you're going to say that that's a racist dog whistle, I don't think it is, because as I mentioned in the beginning, I understand the culture of the small town America because I've lived in it and I've lived near it. That being said, I want to give, for all the people who would kind of take the anti-Aldean stance in this conversation, I understand why people think that's racist. I understand why somebody would read those lyrics and say that he is signaling towards prejudices that exist, that people who do those types of things are not white. And because that perception does exist, doesn't make it right that it exists. In fact, I would argue that it's very wrong that it exists, but it does exist. And so there is a little bit of a where we can hold two opposing ideas in our head at the same time. That's one of the great things about humans, is I can recognize that there are reasons to say those things that are not racially charged, but I can also look at somebody and not call you crazy if you think there are racist reasons for somebody to say that. And I think one of the ways that I would explain it to somebody is that part of the reason we have this dichotomy in our heads when we see lyrics like that is because we have a horrible, in the United States anyway, understanding of how to even talk about race, whether or not what do we even mean when we use that term. We're horrible at it. We're absolutely terrible at it in the United States. And so we conflate things like crime statistics. Like we have these ideas that, because different groups commit crimes at different rates, that when you're talking about crime, you're actually talking about a skin color. And so, these are just kind of toxic elements of the conversation, I think, that is I think important to mention, and important to kind of, understand, back into John's question directly, that that there are good reasons why this went viral, but it still, and to Brent's question, I guess, if we're going to talk about who's at fault, I think everybody who saw that viral argument and didn't try to find a reasonable position from everybody in that conversation is at fault. Because the reason that these things go viral and pull us apart is because we don't look for something good in our opponent. We look for ways to pound our opponent into the ground. We look for ways to get them and to show the audience on our social media that we're the righteous one and they're the evil one. And so, of course, if that's our mindset, then we will never try to parse out different reasons why someone might have said something. Sorry, I got a little worked up on that.
Thank you both. No worries. I do have one more question I want to ask before we move on, but we have to keep the answers real short.
Yep.
And so I'm gonna here was kind of my wrap up question. So the song came, it stayed on the charts for 3 or 4 weeks, and then I saw a few of the major publications like Rolling Stone write an article something along the lines of, well, it's over, folks. That song has just dropped off. There was a steep decline. And so I was just wondering, we have these controversies, they happen, there's a giant spike and they go away. And my question is, and we're going to start with Chris, and we got to be quick. Do you think they really go away, or is there lingering effects?
So they go away in the sense that we are operating currently in an attention economy, which means that we make money from keeping people's attention. That's true of my podcast. I'm as guilty as anyone. And I need to stay relevant in my listeners' ears, which is why I have to continuously search the next thing that people are wanting to talk about, and then I have to talk about that. So in that sense, there are it does disappear because the attention span of the audience, of the consumer of digital content in particular, waxes and wanes. A couple weeks go by and people are on to the next thing. That being said, John, I do think that there are lasting effects for every past controversy, which is that people form an opinion based on one of the past controversies, and then that spins into their perception of the next controversy. It becomes almost fodder or evidence in their mind for the next controversy they see. And it just kind of it's like when you get in a fight with your spouse or whatever. It's oh, but last time, do you remember last time when this happened, and blah, 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 and becomes evidence for more. So I think in a lot of ways, the answer is to your question that yes, it does go away, but it also lasts in a different sense.
Thanks. Brent.
I'll be quick. I think if I want to see some good come out of this phenomenon that we're seeing with Try That in a Small Town and Oliver Anthony. And I think the best thing that could come out of this, my hope, and hopefully our shared hope, is that this is an opportunity to strive towards a culture of greater understanding, of just understanding different perspectives, of when you hear somebody else have a different take on Jason Aldean, who's maybe more critical, of trying to understand that point of view and see where they're coming from, of people who've never heard a song like Try That in a Small Town before, try to understand where Jason Aldean and his songwriters are coming from. I think that could be the lasting legacy of this moment in our culture, and that's what I would like to see.
Thank you so much, Brent. I appreciate you both. Thank you so much. I'm gonna have y'all stick around if you'd like, and we're gonna switch to the community part of it, where I'm gonna ask questions for the community, and y'all are gonna get to respond. And I'm gonna take us off big screen if I can figure out how to do that.